The universe is not impressed by how confident you sound. It does not care about titles, degrees, or traditions. It only responds to one thing, whether you actually understand what's going on. Understanding the universe is not about collecting facts like trophies. It's about tearing ideas apart until nothing fake survives. Most people confuse knowing words with knowing things. They can name a phenomenon, define it, even teach it. Yet the moment you ask, why does it behave this way, silence appears. That silence is the border between memorization and understanding. To truly understand anything, you must be willing to look stupid first. You must ask questions that sound childish, simple, even embarrassing. Because nature does not reward sophistication, it rewards accuracy. If something is true, it will survive questioning. If it's false, it deserves to die. And here's the uncomfortable part. Authority means nothing to reality. An idea isn't correct because a famous person said it. It's correct because repeated experiments agree with it. When theory and experiment disagree, the theory loses every time. That's humility at the scale of the universe. Understanding also demands brutal honesty with yourself. If you cannot explain an idea in plain language, you do not own it. Complex jargon does not equal depth. It often hides confusion. Clarity is not simplicity for the weak. Clarity is simplicity earned through hard thinking. Another thing most people fear: uncertainty. They want final answers, permanent conclusions, mental comfort. But the universe doesn't work that way. Not knowing is not a failure. Pretending to know is. Progress comes from standing at the edge of ignorance and leaning forward, not from building fake certainty to feel safe. Curiosity is not passive interest. It is an aggressive desire to understand how things really work, even when the answer threatens your beliefs. And maybe the most important idea of all, understanding the universe should be joyful. Wonder is not separate from rigor. You can be precise without becoming dull. You can be serious without killing curiosity. The universe is not just a machine to analyze. It is a mystery that invites exploration, rewards honesty, and punishes intellectual laziness. If you want to understand it, don't worship ideas. Don't fear questions. Don't hide behind complexity. Ask, test, explain, repeat. That is how the universe reveals itself, not to the loudest voice, but to the most curious mind. Understanding beats memorization. Memorization is cheap. Anyone can memorize. A parrot can memorize. A hard drive can store more facts than any human who has ever lived. If memorization were intelligence, Google would be the smartest mind on earth. But it isn't, because knowing information is not the same as knowing reality. Understanding means something very different. Understanding means you can take an idea apart, turn it upside down, break, rebuild it, and still recognize it. It means the knowledge lives in your mind, not just on your tongue. When memorization fails, and it always does under pressure, understanding survives. Most education systems train people to repeat answers, not to ask questions. Students learn formulas without knowing where they came from. They learn laws without knowing why nature obeys them. They learn conclusions without ever touching the reasoning that produced them. This creates an illusion of knowledge, impressive on exams, useless in real thinking. The universe does not reward memorization. It rewards insight. You can memorize every equation about motion and still have no idea why something falls. You can recite definitions of energy and still not understand what energy is. When memorized knowledge meets a new problem, one not seen before, it collapses. Understanding adapts. Understanding transfers. Understanding creates. Real understanding begins the moment you say, "I don't get this yet." That sentence scares people because it exposes ignorance. But ignorance exposed is the first step toward truth. Ignorance hidden behind memorized words is permanent. If you truly understand something, you can explain it without hiding behind technical language. Jargon is not intelligence. It's often camouflage. Simplicity is not dumbing down. It is distillation. It takes far more mental effort to explain an idea clearly than to repeat it in complicated terms. Clarity is proof of ownership. Nature itself is brutally honest. It does not care how elegant your explanation sounds. It only responds to what actually works. You can memorize theories all day long, but one failed experiment is enough to expose the gap between knowing and understanding. Understanding also demands courage. It requires questioning what everyone else accepts. It requires the willingness to doubt books, teachers, traditions, not out of arrogance, but out of respect for truth. Progress has never come from obedient repetition. It has always come from someone asking an uncomfortable why. Memorization creates followers. Understanding creates thinkers. A memorized mind looks for instructions. An understanding mind looks for patterns. When something unexpected happens, the memorized mind panics. The understanding mind becomes curious. Curiosity is not a personality trait. It is a habit built by refusing to accept shallow answers. There is also joy in understanding, a deep, quiet satisfaction that memorization can never give. Memorization is mechanical. Understanding feels like suddenly seeing the picture after staring at scattered pieces. It is the moment confusion turns into clarity. That moment is addictive, and it is the engine of all discovery, but understanding is uncomfortable because it exposes how little you truly know. The deeper you go, the larger ignorance becomes. This frightens people who want certainty, final answers, and intellectual safety. But certainty is not a requirement for intelligence. Honesty is. To understand the universe, you must accept uncertainty as permanent. The goal is not to eliminate mystery, but to reduce confusion. Every answer opens better questions. That is not a flaw. That is how knowledge grows. Memorization asks, what should I remember? Understanding asks, why must it be this way and not another? That single shift changes everything. When you understand, you are no longer dependent on authority. You don't need someone to tell you what to think. You can test ideas against reality yourself. This is intellectual independence, and it is rare because it is demanding. Understanding takes time. It takes effort. It takes failure. You will be wrong many times. But being wrong while thinking is infinitely better than being correct by repetition. One builds insight. The other builds fragility. In the end, the universe is not a textbook to be memorized. It is a system to be explored. It speaks in patterns, not definitions. It rewards those who listen carefully, question deeply, and refuse to settle for surface-level explanations. Understanding beats memorization because memorization ends where learning should begin. And anyone serious about truth knows this. Facts fade. Definitions change, but understanding, once earned, becomes a tool you can use forever. Question everything, especially the obvious. The most dangerous ideas are not the ones that sound strange. They are the ones that sound so familiar that no one thinks to challenge them. The obvious is comfortable. It feels safe. It feels settled. And that is exactly why it deserves suspicion. Progress does not begin by attacking the unknown. It begins by re-examining what everyone assumes is already understood. Most people live inside borrowed conclusions. They inherit explanations the way they inherit language, without remembering when or why they accepted them. Once an idea becomes common, it stops being questioned. Once it stops being questioned, it stops being examined. And the moment examination ends, thinking ends. The universe does not label anything as obvious. That label exists only in the human mind. Nature simply behaves the way it does. When something feels obvious, it usually means we have grown accustomed to it, not that we have understood it. Familiarity is not evidence of truth. Repetition is not proof. Questioning the obvious is uncomfortable because it threatens stability. It forces you to admit that what you know might be incomplete or worse, wrong. That discomfort is not a weakness. It is the price of intellectual honesty. Every meaningful discovery has required someone to tolerate that discomfort longer than others were willing to. The obvious often survives not because it is correct, but because it is convenient. It fits into existing beliefs. It reduces mental effort. It avoids conflict. But convenience has no relationship with reality. The universe does not simplify itself to protect our comfort. When you stop questioning the obvious, you stop learning. You begin defending ideas instead of testing them. You confuse familiarity with understanding. At that point, knowledge becomes fragile. It works only as long as nothing unexpected happens. True questioning is not rebellion for its own sake. It is not cynicism. It is not disrespect. It is curiosity paired with discipline. To question something properly, you must be willing to follow the answer wherever it leads, even if it contradicts your expectations. The obvious collapses quickly under honest questioning. Ask where an idea came from. Ask what assumptions it depends on. Ask what evidence supports it and what evidence could destroy it. If an idea cannot survive those questions, it does not deserve your confidence. Children ask powerful questions because they have not yet learned what they are not supposed to question. Over time, that instinct is trained out of them. Society rewards obedience more than curiosity. Exams reward correct answers, not good questions. Slowly, questioning becomes a risk instead of a habit. But the universe does not care what you were taught not to question. It only cares about what is true. Many of history's biggest mistakes were built on obvious ideas. Ideas so accepted that no one thought to test them. Once questioned, they collapsed quickly, revealing not stupidity, but complacency. Intelligence is not the absence of error. It is the refusal to protect error from examination. Questioning the obvious also reveals hidden complexity. What appears simple is often layered with assumptions. When you peel those layers back, you discover mechanisms, constraints, and patterns that were invisible before. That is where understanding deepens. There is also humility in questioning. It reminds you that your perspective is limited, that your experience is not universal, that certainty should always be provisional. This humility is not passive. It sharpens perception. It keeps the mind flexible. Some people fear that constant questioning leads to chaos. It does not. Blind acceptance leads to chaos. Questioning is what builds reliable knowledge. Structures that cannot survive questioning were never stable to begin with. When you question the obvious, you regain ownership of your thinking. You stop outsourcing judgment to authority. You stop mistaking consensus for truth. You begin interacting directly with reality, not second-hand interpretations of it. This does not mean rejecting everything. It means earning belief instead of inheriting it. It means holding ideas tentatively, ready to adjust them when evidence demands it. Strength of mind is not stubbornness. It is adaptability. The obvious is seductive because it feels complete, but completeness is an illusion. The universe is deeper than first impressions. Every surface explanation hides better questions underneath. Questioning everything does not make life harder. It makes it clearer. Confusion decreases as assumptions are exposed. Thinking becomes cleaner, sharper, more precise. In the end, questioning the obvious is not about being different. It is about being accurate. Reality does not reward agreement. It rewards those who ask the right questions and refuse to stop at comfortable answers. The obvious is where most people stop. That is exactly why it is where serious thinking begins. Nature doesn't care about your opinions. It never has, and it never will. The universe does not listen to arguments, intentions, or confidence. It does not adjust itself to fit beliefs, traditions, or personal preferences. It operates by rules that exist independently of what anyone thinks about them. You may dislike those rules, misunderstand them, or deny them entirely, and nothing will change. Opinion is cheap because it costs nothing to hold. Reality is expensive because it demands evidence. You can argue endlessly about how something should work, but nature responds only to how it does work. When belief and reality collide, reality wins without explanation or apology. This is why experiments matter. Not because scientists enjoy complexity, but because nature refuses to answer to words. It answers only to tests. A theory is not validated by how logical it sounds or how many people agree with it. It is validated by whether nature behaves the way the theory predicts. One failed prediction is enough to expose an error, no matter how elegant the idea. Human history is full of confident opinions that reality crushed. People once believed heavier objects fell faster than lighter ones. It felt obvious. It matched intuition. Nature disagreed. No amount of arguing could convince gravity to cooperate with opinion. Only observation forced correction. Nature is brutally fair. It treats all ideas equally by testing them. It shows no favoritism to authority, tradition, or popularity. An unknown thinker with a correct model will always outperform a famous thinker with a wrong one. Truth is not a vote. This indifference is not cruelty. It is clarity. Because nature does not care, it provides a reliable standard. Personal bias cannot bend it. Emotional attachment cannot soften it. This makes nature the ultimate referee in every intellectual dispute. The danger begins when people confuse explanation with control. Naming something does not grant power over it. Describing a law does not make it optional. Understanding is not command, it is alignment. You do not tell the universe what to do. You learn what it does and work with it. Opinions feel powerful because they are internal. They create certainty without effort. But that certainty is fragile. The moment it is tested against reality, it either adapts or shatters. Refusing to test opinions does not protect them. It merely delays failure. Reality has no obligation to be intuitive. Many truths feel wrong at first. They contradict common sense. They challenge everyday experience. This is not because nature is strange. It is because human intuition evolved for survival, not accuracy. When intuition conflicts with evidence, intuition must yield. Nature also does not explain itself. It does not offer comfort or meaning. It simply behaves. Any understanding we gain is earned through careful observation, measurement, and repeated testing. This makes knowledge slow, difficult, and incredibly valuable. Respecting nature's indifference is a form of intellectual maturity. It forces humility. It reminds you that being convinced is not the same as being correct. It teaches restraint, to wait for evidence before forming conclusions, and to remain willing to abandon them when evidence changes. This attitude extends beyond science. In any system governed by reality, economics, engineering, health, technology, opinions detached from evidence fail. Bridges collapse, markets crash, bodies break. Reality enforces its rules without debate. Nature does not punish ignorance out of malice. It simply reveals it. Failure is not personal. It is informational. It shows where understanding ends and assumption begins. Those who learn from this adjust. Those who argue with reality repeat the same mistakes. There is freedom in accepting that nature does not care. It removes the burden of defending beliefs. It shifts focus from being right to finding out. It replaces ego with curiosity. Instead of asking, "Do I believe this?" you ask, "Does it work?" Progress depends on this mindset. Every advance comes from submitting ideas to reality and accepting the outcome even when it disappoints. This is not submission in a weak sense. It is alignment with the only judge that cannot be fooled. In the end, opinions are stories we tell ourselves. Nature is the story that continues whether we listen or not. Understanding grows when we stop trying to persuade the universe and start paying attention to it. Nature doesn't care about your opinions, and that is precisely why it can teach you the truth. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. That statement sounds harsh, but it is precise. Complexity often feels impressive, yet it is usually the refuge of confusion. When an idea is truly understood, it becomes flexible. It can be reshaped, translated, and expressed in different forms without losing its meaning. When it is not understood, it becomes rigid, dependent on exact wording, formulas, or jargon to survive. Many people mistake difficult language for deep thinking. They hide behind technical terms, not because the idea requires them, but because they themselves are unsure what the idea actually means. Complicated explanations can create the illusion of intelligence, but illusion collapses the moment clarity is demanded. Simplicity is not the absence of depth, it is the result of depth. To explain something simply, you must see its structure clearly. You must know what is essential and what is decoration. You must understand cause and effect, not just labels and outcomes. This takes work. It takes struggling with the idea until it becomes transparent. A memorized explanation cannot be simplified. It breaks if you try. An understood idea can be rebuilt from scratch. You can start from first principles, use analogies, draw examples, and still arrive at the same conclusion. That is how you know the idea is yours. The test of understanding is transfer. Can you apply the idea in a new situation? Can you teach it to someone without assuming prior knowledge? Can you answer unexpected questions without panicking? If the answer is no, then the knowledge is incomplete. Simplicity also exposes flaws. When you try to explain something clearly, gaps appear. Assumptions become visible. Weak reasoning reveals itself. This is uncomfortable, which is why many avoid simplifying. It forces confrontation with what you do not yet understand. The universe itself is not complicated in expression. It is precise in behavior. The laws that govern it are simple in form, even if their consequences are rich and complex. Complexity emerges from simple rules interacting, not from vague or mystical explanations. Clear explanations respect the listener. They assume intelligence, not prior expertise. They invite engagement rather than intimidation. Confusion does not make an idea more true, it only makes it less accessible. There is also honesty in simplicity. It prevents exaggeration. It prevents hiding uncertainty behind fancy words. When something is not fully understood, simplicity forces you to say, "This part is still unclear." That admission is not weakness, it is accuracy. Education fails when it rewards repetition instead of explanation. Students learn to recite without understanding. They pass exams yet cannot explain what they have learned in their own words. This creates fragile knowledge that disappears under pressure. True understanding creates confidence, not arrogance. You do not need to dominate a conversation or impress an audience. You can explain calmly, clearly, and adapt to the listener. You are not protecting the idea. You are sharing it. Simplicity is also a tool for discovery. When you try to simplify an idea, you often discover better questions. You strip away unnecessary detail and see the core problem more clearly. This leads to deeper insight. The fear of oversimplification is often exaggerated. Oversimplification removes truth. True simplicity preserves it. The difference lies in understanding. Without understanding, simplification distorts. With understanding, it clarifies. In any field, the best thinkers are the clearest communicators, not because they aim to be popular, but because clarity is the natural byproduct of deep comprehension. They know what matters and what does not. If you want to know whether you truly understand something, try to explain to a curious child or to yourself without notes. If you stumble, if you rely on memorized phrases, if the explanation collapses, the work is not finished. Understanding is not proven by how much you can say. It is proven by how little you need to say without losing meaning. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it. Not yet. And that yet is an invitation to think harder, dig deeper, and earn clarity instead of performing intelligence. Uncertainty is not weakness, it's intellectual honesty. The desire for certainty is one of the strongest human instincts. We want clear answers, fixed conclusions, and solid ground beneath our thinking. Certainty feels safe, it feels like control. But the universe does not offer that kind of comfort. It offers evidence, probabilities, patterns, and a constant reminder that our understanding is always incomplete. Pretending to be certain does not make you intelligent, it makes you rigid. Intellectual weakness is not saying, "I don't know." Intellectual weakness is being afraid to say it. The moment you claim absolute certainty, you stop listening. You stop testing, you stop learning, you replace curiosity with defense, and defense has never discovered anything new. Honest thinking begins where confidence ends. It begins with the recognition that every explanation is provisional, useful, but not sacred. Reality does not reveal itself all at once. It reveals itself slowly, through error, correction, and refinement. Certainty blocks that process. Uncertainty keeps it alive. Many people treat doubt as a flaw, as something to be eliminated. In truth, doubt is a tool. It keeps ideas flexible. It forces them to face evidence repeatedly. Without doubt, beliefs harden into dogma, and dogma resists reality instead of learning from it. The universe is not built on final answers. It is built on patterns that work until they don't. Every law, every model, every explanation has limits. Acknowledging those limits is not surrender, it is accuracy. Ignoring them is arrogance. Uncertainty also separates belief from evidence. Belief demands commitment. Evidence demands attention. When you admit uncertainty, you shift from defending ideas to investigating them. That shift is the foundation of progress. There is a difference between being confused and being uncertain. Confusion is lack of understanding. Uncertainty is understanding the boundaries of your knowledge. One is temporary ignorance. The other is intellectual maturity. History rewards those who were comfortable being uncertain. Every major advancement came from someone willing to admit that existing explanations were incomplete. They did not destroy certainty recklessly. They questioned it carefully. That care made discovery possible. People often mistake confidence for competence. A confident voice can sound convincing even when it is wrong. Nature is not impressed by confidence. It responds only to what is correct. Uncertainty, paired with testing, is far more reliable than confidence without evidence. Living with uncertainty requires courage. It means resisting the urge to close questions prematurely. It means tolerating ambiguity while continuing to think clearly. This is difficult, which is why certainty is so tempting. But temptation is not a guide to truth. Uncertainty also protects against self-deception. When you accept that you may be wrong, you are more likely to notice errors. You become alert instead of defensive. You trade pride for precision. Some fear that uncertainty leads to indecision. In reality, it leads to better decisions. Acting with awareness of uncertainty encourages caution, adaptation, and revision. Acting with false certainty encourages recklessness. Intellectual honesty demands that you distinguish between what you know, what you think you know, and what you do not know. Blurring those categories creates confusion. Respecting them creates clarity. The strongest thinkers are not those with the loudest conclusions, but those with the sharpest questions. They move forward without pretending the road is finished. They revise without shame. They abandon ideas without regret when evidence demands it. Uncertainty does not paralyze progress. It guides it. It tells you where to look next. It tells you which assumptions need testing. It keeps thought dynamic. To understand the universe is not to eliminate mystery, but to engage with it honestly. Every answer opens deeper questions. That is not failure. That is success. Certainty ends conversation. Uncertainty begins discovery. Uncertainty is not weakness. It is respect for reality. It is the discipline of admitting what the evidence allows and nothing more. Humans love to ask how far we can go into space, but that question is already wrong. The correct question is, how far does the universe allow us to go? Because space is not empty. It is a battlefield of distance, time, radiation, and energy, and humans are fragile visitors. Let's start with a simple fact that hurts our pride. The universe is not designed for us. No air, no warmth, no forgiveness. Even the nearest star is so far away that our fastest spacecraft would need tens of thousands of years to reach it. And that's not a technology problem. That's a physics problem. Everyone talks about faster engines. No one talks about the real jailer, speed itself. There is a universal speed limit, not because nature is cruel, but because it's consistent. Cross that limit and the equations break. Energy requirements explode toward infinity, meaning you don't almost reach it. You either obey it or you don't move at all. Now suppose we accept that limit and move as fast as reality allows. Another enemy appears, time. A journey to even nearby stars takes longer than a human life. So who arrives? Not the explorer, but their descendants. And by then, the reason for the journey may already be forgotten. Travel becomes not exploration, but inheritance. Then comes the final insult, energy. To move a human, protect them from radiation, keep them alive, and accelerate them to meaningful cosmic speeds requires absurd amounts of energy. Not a lot, not very difficult. Absurd. At some point, the universe is politely telling us this experiment is no longer worth running. And here's the uncomfortable conclusion. The universe may be filled with galaxies, stars, and planets, but access is not guaranteed. Knowledge travels easily. Light travels freely. But humans, we are slow, delicate, and bound to a small corner of space-time, and that's not a failure. That's a reminder. Our real power may not be how far we travel, but how deeply we understand the place we already occupy, because the universe doesn't care about our dreams, but it does reward those who learn its rules. And once you truly understand the limits, you stop asking childish questions about conquest and start asking adult questions about meaning. The universe is not built for humans, and that is not an opinion. It is a measurable fact written into every law of physics we've ever discovered. The moment you step outside the thin shell of air wrapped around Earth, survival drops from natural to impossible. No oxygen to breathe, no pressure to keep your blood from boiling, no magnetic shield to protect your DNA from being shredded by radiation. Space does not merely ignore us, it actively tries to dismantle us. That alone should force us to rethink how casually we talk about exploring it. On Earth, life evolved inside a narrow comfort zone. Temperature, gravity, chemistry, and time all cooperate just enough for fragile biology to survive. The universe outside that zone does not negotiate. A tiny mistake in pressure or heat kills a human in minutes. A small increase in radiation rewrites cells until cancer becomes inevitable. This isn't bad luck, it's a warning label. The universe isn't hostile in a moral sense, it's simply indifferent. And indifference at cosmic scales is lethal. Distance is the first wall we hit. Space is not big, it is obscenely big. The moon feels far until you realize it's practically next door. Mars is a longer walk, but still inside our neighborhood. Beyond that, the scale becomes ridiculous. The nearest star system is so distant that even light, the fastest thing reality allows, takes years to arrive. Human bodies do not operate on years in a metal box timelines. Bones weaken, muscles decay, minds unravel. Biology was never meant for prolonged isolation in artificial bubbles drifting through nothing. And this is where most optimistic ideas collapse. People imagine better engines, smarter ships, cleaner fuel. But the real limitation is not engineering, it is speed. Speed is expensive. Each small increase demands disproportionately more energy. Push harder, and the universe pushes back harder. Eventually, the math stops being inconvenient and starts being absurd. At some point, you're no longer building a spacecraft, you're trying to bribe reality itself. Even if you could move fast enough, time becomes your enemy. A journey that lasts decades may seem manageable on paper, but humans don't live on paper. They age, they break, they die. Interstellar travel quickly turns into a generational experiment where the people who arrive are not the ones who left, and possibly no longer care why the journey began at all. Exploration loses meaning when memory dies before arrival. Then there's radiation, silent, invisible, relentless. Outside Earth's protective field, space is soaked in high-energy particles that slice through tissue and scramble DNA. Shielding helps, but shielding adds mass, and mass demands energy. Again, physics tightens the noose. You can't cheat one problem without feeding another. Every solution creates a new obstacle, and the obstacles stack faster than human ingenuity. Gravity itself betrays us. Our bodies evolved under a very specific gravitational pull. Remove it and systems start failing. Hearts change shape. Vision degrades. Balance disappears. Put us in stronger gravity and movement becomes torture. The universe offers almost no environments that sit comfortably within our biological tolerance. We are exquisitely specialized creatures trying to survive in a reality that prefers simplicity over comfort. What makes this hard to accept is not the science, it's the ego. Humans want to believe they are meant to spread everywhere, that intelligence automatically earns access to the cosmos. But intelligence does not override constraints. Knowing the rules does not grant permission to break them. The universe does not reward ambition, it rewards compliance with its laws, and yet this realization is not depressing, it's clarifying. It strips away fantasy and replaces it with honesty. We stop asking childish questions about conquering space and start asking adult questions about understanding it. We learn that sending machines is easy compared to sending flesh. Information travels far better than bodies ever will. Knowledge is the real interstellar traveler. The universe may not be built for humans, but it is built for comprehension. It allows us to observe, calculate, predict, and understand astonishing truths from a fragile planet orbiting an ordinary star. Perhaps that is the real miracle. Not that we can go everywhere, but that we can know so much without leaving home. And once you accept that, your focus shifts. Instead of dreaming about escaping Earth, you start appreciating how rare and delicate this place is. Instead of fantasizing about distant worlds, you realize how extraordinary it is that one world already works. The universe didn't make us explorers of space. It made us explorers of meaning. That may be the hardest limit to accept, but it may also be the most important one. Speed is the real prison, and most people don't realize they've already hit the bars. We talk about space travel as if distance is the enemy, but distance is only scary because of how slowly we are allowed to cross it. The universe doesn't stop us with walls or borders, it stops us with a number, a single unforgiving limit built into reality itself. No matter how advanced our technology becomes, no matter how intelligent we think we are confined by how fast we can move through space. Every dream of reaching distant stars eventually crashes into this limit. You can build bigger engines, burn more fuel, and invent smarter designs, but each step forward costs more than the last. Speed doesn't increase linearly, it punishes ambition. Doubling your speed doesn't double your energy needs, it multiplies each. Push hard enough and the required energy explodes beyond reason. At that point, you're no longer engineering a spacecraft, you're demanding the universe rewrite its own rules for your convenience. The cruel part is that the ultimate speed limit is not negotiable. It isn't a challenge to overcome or a milestone waiting for a breakthrough. It is woven into the structure of space and time themselves. Try to approach it, and mass becomes heavier, time behaves strangely, and energy demands climb toward infinity. There is no clever shortcut, no hidden loophole waiting to be discovered. The equations don't bend for hope. What makes this feel especially frustrating is how close the universe teases us. Light moves fast enough to cross unimaginable distances, carrying images of galaxies billions of years old straight into our telescopes. Information travels effortlessly across the cosmos while bodies remain trapped. We can see almost everything, but touch almost nothing. Vision without access becomes a special kind of torment, awareness without reach. Even if we imagine cruising at a respectable fraction of that ultimate speed, the consequences remain brutal. Time does not stay neutral. For travelers, it slows. For everyone else, it races ahead. A journey that feels manageable inside a ship can erase entire civilizations outside it. You don't return to the world you left. You return to a stranger, or more likely, you never return at all. Speed doesn't just limit travel, it fractures continuity. And then there's the human body, which reacts to high-speed travel not with adaptability but with resistance. Acceleration itself becomes a threat. Too much of it, and organs shift, blood pools, and consciousness fails. To move fast, you must accelerate slowly, which means spending even more time in transit. Speed once again tightens the trap. People often imagine a future where technology solves this problem, but that belief misunderstands the nature of constraints. Technology works inside physics, not outside it. You can optimize, refine, and improve, but you cannot negotiate with fundamental limits. The universe is not impressed by cleverness. It only responds to compliance. This is where optimism quietly turns into fantasy. Faster than light travel sounds exciting because it ignores the cost. It treats speed like a narrative device rather than a physical reality. But speed is not just motion. It is a relationship between energy, mass, and time. Break one, and the others break with it. The prison is perfectly balanced. What's most unsettling is that speed doesn't merely block exploration, it reshapes our understanding of existence. If reaching other stars takes longer than a human lifetime, then interstellar travel stops being personal. It becomes abstract, generational, or purely theoretical. The explorer is replaced by the project, meaning drains away when no one lives long enough to experience the result. And yet, this limitation forces an uncomfortable clarity. It reminds us that we are not meant to roam freely across the universe like tourists. We are localized creatures bound to a narrow slice of space-time. Our strength is not in how fast we move, but in how deeply we think. The universe lets us understand speed far better than it lets us use it. Speed is the real prison, not because it stops us from going forward, but because it exposes the boundary between imagination and reality. It shows us where dreams must submit to math. And in that submission, something important happens. We stop chasing impossible distances and start valuing the rare miracle of being here at all. The bars were never made of steel. They were made of numbers. Time betrays the traveler the moment the journey becomes long enough to matter. We imagine space travel as a problem of engines and destinations, but time is the quiet traitor hiding inside every plan. You can survive vacuum with technology, shield radiation with mass, and navigate DI. Stance with precision, but time cannot be sealed outside the spacecraft. It comes with you, distorts around you, and ultimately decides whether the journey has any meaning at all. At first, time seems cooperative. Days pass, routines form, systems run. But stretch the journey into years, then decades, and the betrayal begins. The human body is not a timeless machine. Cells age, bones weaken, muscles decay, and the brain slowly changes its chemistry. Even in perfect conditions, biology is on a countdown. Space does not pause that clock, it accelerates its consequences. Isolation, confinement, and monotony erode the mind long before the destination ever comes into view. The cruel irony is that physics makes this worse, not better. As speed increases, time stops behaving intuitively. For the traveler, clocks slow down. For the universe left behind, they race ahead. This sounds like a gift until you understand the cost. You may arrive feeling younger than expected, but everything you cared about has aged without you. Friends are gone, cultures have shifted, languages have evolved, home becomes a historical concept rather than a place. Time doesn't just pass, it severs continuity. This is where the idea of exploration quietly collapses. Exploration assumes return, comparison, shared experience, but a journey that stretches across generations destroys that structure. The people who leave are not the people who arrive. Purpose erodes when memory does not survive the trip. The mission becomes paperwork handed down through descendants who never chose it. At that point, travel stops being human and becomes procedural. Even if you ignore return and focus only on arrival, time still demands payment. A destination reached after a lifetime is not experienced the same way as one reached after an afternoon. Curiosity dulls, motivation shifts. The emotional reward that justified the journey evaporates long before the journey ends. Time doesn't just delay gratification, it dissolves it. Then there is the biological mismatch. Humans evolved under cycles, day and night seasons, aging alongside a stable environment. Long-duration travel breaks these rhythms. Artificial light replaces stars. Clocks become arbitrary. The mind, deprived of natural temporal anchors, begins to drift. Depression, cognitive decline, and psychological fragmentation are not side effects, they are predictable outcomes. Time, when stripped of context, becomes disorienting rather than informative. People like to imagine solutions, suspended animation, digital minds, extended lifespans. But each solution quietly admits defeat. Freeze the body and you remove the experience. Upload the mind and the traveler is no longer human. Extend life indefinitely and the journey loses urgency and meaning. Every workaround sacrifices the very thing travel was supposed to preserve. What makes time's betrayal so profound is that it doesn't feel like an enemy at first. It feels patient, reasonable. It allows planning, scheduling, optimism. Only later does it reveal the truth that meaning is time-bound. Experiences matter because they happen within a finite window. Stretch that window too far, and experiences lose their sharpness, their urgency, their emotional weight. In the end, time exposes a hard truth about our place in the universe. We are not designed for epics measured in millennia. We are designed for stories measured in decades. Our ambitions may reach the stars, but our significance is anchored to a lifespan that makes such distances impractical. This isn't a failure of imagination. It's a reality check. Time betrays the traveler not out of malice, but out of consistency. It applies the same rules everywhere, without exception. And in doing so, it teaches us something uncomfortable but essential. The universe may be vast, but meaning is local. It lives in moments that cannot be postponed indefinitely. Once you understand that, the obsession with distant futures fad. You stop treating time as something to outrun and start treating it as something to respect. Because the real tragedy is not that we can't travel far enough. It's that we might waste the time we already have chasing destinations that will never arrive while we're still alive to care. Energy costs become absurd the moment ambition outruns realism. At small scales, effort feels proportional to reward. Burn a little fuel, move a little farther. But the universe does not scale politely. Push beyond the familiar and energy stops being a tool and starts becoming a tyrant. Every extra bit of speed, every added layer of protection, every extension of distance demands not just more energy, but wildly more, to the point where the numbers stop feeling physical and start feeling imaginary. This is where most space travel fantasies quietly collapse. We picture sleek ships gliding between stars, but we rarely ask what it actually costs to move mass through space at extreme speeds. Energy is not free, and it is not forgiving. Accelerating a tiny probe is manageable. Accelerating a human-rated spacecraft is a different category of problem entirely. Add life support, radiation shielding, redundancy and safety margins, and the mass balloons. Each added kilogram multiplies the energy required, not just to move, but to keep moving. The trap is exponential growth. Energy requirements don't rise gently, they curve upward sharply, then violently. At first the curve looks manageable, then it turns steep, then it goes vertical. Beyond that point, the concept of more fuel stops making sense. You would need energy outputs comparable to stars to push a single vehicle to meaningful interstellar speeds, not to explore the galaxy, just to reach the next star within a human-relevant time frame. And energy is never isolated. Producing it has costs, storing it has costs, controlling it safely has costs. High-energy systems generate heat that must be removed, radiation that must be contained, and risks that multiply with scale. A machine powerful enough to accelerate a crewed ship to extreme speeds becomes, by necessity, a machine that can easily destroy itself. Stability becomes as hard as propulsion. This leads to a brutal reality. Space travel does not fail because we lack imagination. It fails because imagination ignores bookkeeping. Physics keeps perfect accounts. Every joule must come from somewhere. Every inefficiency compounds. You can't cheat by being clever. Cleverness just shifts where the bill arrives. Eventually, it arrives in full, even slowing down costs energy. You don't just spend energy to leave. You spend it again to stop. Momentum doesn't care about your plans. A ship arriving at high speed must dump that energy somewhere, and space offers very few safe places to put it. The faster you go, the harder it is to arrive intact. The universe charges you twice, once for ambition and once for control. This absurdity forces an uncomfortable comparison. On Earth, the energy required to move people across continents feels trivial. Planes, ships, and rockets make distance seem conquered. But that familiarity hides how special our situation is. Earth gives us gravity wells, atmospheres, and abundant energy sources. Strip those away, and movement becomes brutally expensive. Space removes all the subsidies we take for granted. People often propose breakthroughs, perfect reactors, exotic fuels, revolutionary engines, but even perfect efficiency doesn't save you from scale. Efficiency reduces waste, it doesn't eliminate demand. When the demand itself becomes astronomical, perfection barely moves the needle. The problem isn't inefficiency, it's magnitude. At some point, energy costs stop being a technical challenge and become a philosophical one. Why spend stellar amounts of energy to move a handful of fragile organisms across a void that offers no guarantee of return? The universe doesn't forbid it explicitly. It simply makes it irrational. The cost-benefit analysis collapses under its own weight. This is not pessimism, it is clarity. It tells us where physical exploration makes sense and where it doesn't. It explains why robotic probes outperform crude missions at extreme distances, and why information travels farther than bodies ever will. Data is light. Humans are heavy. Energy costs become absurd as a way of drawing a boundary. Not a wall, but a curve that steepens until progress becomes indistinguishable from fantasy. Understanding that curve doesn't diminish humanity, it refines it. It forces us to choose battles that matter and investments that pay off. The universe is not telling us to stop dreaming. It is telling us to count the cost. And when the numbers grow so large that they swallow the dream itself, wisdom is knowing when to change the dream rather than bankrupt reality trying to fulfill it. The final irony is that the universe may be overflowing with destinations, yet almost none of them are meant to be reached by us. After all the equations, all the ambition, all the technological bravado, we arrive at a quiet, unsettling realization. The cosmos is not limited by lack of wonders, but by access. It shows us everything and offers us almost nothing to touch. We look up and see galaxies by the billions, stars by the trillions, planets scattered like dust. The scale invites conquest, or at least visitation. But the same laws that allow us to see so far also prevent us from going far. Light crosses the universe with ease, matter does not. Awareness travels freely, bodies remain trapped. The universe reveals itself generously, then locks the door. This is the opposite of what intuition promises. Intelligence feels like a passport. We assume that understanding earns permission. But the universe does not trade access for insight. It hands us knowledge without mobility, vision without reach. The smarter we become, the clearer the confinement appears. Progress doesn't open the cage, it illuminates the bars. There is a deeper irony hiding here. The more we learn about the universe, the more local we realize our lives must be. Grand cosmic narratives collapse into fragile human timelines. Interstellar empires turn into logistical absurdities. Colonizing the stars sounds heroic until the numbers drain it of romance. The future becomes less about expansion and more about endurance. What makes this hard to accept is that limitation feels like failure. We are conditioned to believe that every boundary exists to be broken. But some boundaries are not challenges, they are definitions. They tell you what kind of universe you live in. This one allows understanding without domination, curiosity without conquest. That is not a flaw. It is a feature. The irony sharpens when you consider where meaning actually lives. It does not scale with distance. It scales with experience. A planet across the galaxy is emotionally irrelevant compared to a moment here that changes a life. The universe gives us infinite scenery, but meaning remains stubbornly finite. We are not built to care about everything, only about what fits inside a human lifespan, and yet we keep reaching outward, hoping that distance itself will provide significance. But distance is empty. It is just more space between events that matter. The universe may be vast, but vastness alone is not purpose. Purpose emerges from interaction, from consequences that unfold within time frames we can feel. This is where the final irony becomes unavoidable. The same laws that prevent us from roaming the cosmos are the laws that make our existence precious. Finiteness creates urgency, limits create focus. If we could go anywhere at any time, nothing would matter very much. Scarcity is not just a constraint, it is a source of value. The universe does not owe us access to its farthest corners. It has already given us something far rarer, the ability to comprehend it from a small, stable platform where life can persist long. Enough to ask questions. We are not cosmic tourists, we are cosmic witnesses. That role may sound smaller, but it is not. To understand a universe you cannot fully explore is a profound position. It means your importance is not measured by territory, but by insight. Not by how far you travel, but by how deeply you see. The final irony, then, is not that we are trapped on one planet. It is that this trap is precisely what allows consciousness, culture, science, and meaning to exist at all. The universe closes the door to endless expansion, then hands us a window wide enough to see almost everything. And maybe that is the point, not to go everywhere, but to understand enough of what we can see to live wisely where we are.
There is an invisible structure that determines how far your mind can evolve. Most people spend their entire lives using only the lowest levels of thought. They repeat, they memorize, they imitate, but they don't truly think. They believe that learning means collecting information, but learning, in its purest form, is the transformation of how you think. What you're about to understand isn't a memory trick or a study hack. It's a map of the human mind, the 7 levels of thought that can turn an ordinary student into a true master of reasoning. These levels aren't just steps of knowledge. They are stages of consciousness. Each one represents a different way of interacting with reality, from the simplest, where the brain merely copies what it sees, to the highest, where the mind observes itself and masters its own process of thinking. And when you master these levels, something extraordinary happens. You stop being a slave to information and become the author of understanding. The journey begins at the most basic point, the level of remembrance. And that's exactly where most people get lost, believing that memorizing is the same as learning. Pay close attention now, because this is where almost every student in the world goes astray. The first level of the mind is remembrance, and it's deceptive. It's the level where you confuse effort with progress. The more you repeat, the more you think you've mastered something. But the truth is, the brain here only repeats without understanding. It's like a machine copying words it doesn't comprehend. It records sounds, shapes, and letters, but it doesn't create connections. At this stage, knowledge is shallow, like words written in sand. A gentle breeze, time, stress, or distraction erases everything. That's why people spend hours studying and days later remember nothing, because remembering is not understanding. At this level, the mind works mechanically. It uses flashcards, rereading, repetition, endless summaries. It gets tired, but it doesn't grow. And the more it repeats, the more it believes it's improving. But in reality, it's just reinforcing the same cycle of superficiality. This is where the illusion of learning begins, the comfort of memorization. Because memorizing feels like progress, even when there is none. It's like running on a treadmill. The body moves, but it goes nowhere. True learning begins when you decide to question the very act of remembering. When instead of repeating, you start asking yourself, why is this like that? Where does this idea come from? How do I know that I know? That moment changes everything. It marks the shift from empty memory to living comprehension, from echo to reasoning. So from now on, to complete this level, do this. Explain as you memorize. Don't read passively. Say out loud what you just learned, even if it's still simple. This forces your brain to leave echo mode and enter understanding mode. Use visual association. Every memory needs an anchor. Turn words into images. Connect concepts to places, faces, or sensations. The brain remembers better than it understands, but it understands better than it repeats. Rewrite creatively. Take your notes and rephrase them without looking at the original. This makes your mind reconstruct, not copy. Test your memory under pressure. Close the book, stare at the ceiling, and say out loud what you recall. If you can't, don't blame yourself. That's your brain showing the path toward comprehension. And above all, avoid the comfort of repetition. Repetition feels good because it feels like progress. Question that. Remember, the easier it feels, the less real the progress is. From this point on, as your mind grows tired of repeating, curiosity begins to awaken. And that's what opens the door to the second level, understanding.
Now imagine the noise beginning to turn into sound.
The words you once repeated without meaning finally start to make sense. This is the second level of the mind, understanding. Here you stop being a repeater of information and start becoming an interpreter of knowledge. At the first level, the brain only copies. At the second, it connects. And that simple shift changes everything. It's when something inside you says, now I get it. It's the moment when knowledge stops feeling foreign and begins to feel like a part of who you are. But understanding doesn't happen by accident. It demands that you engage with the idea. You must talk to the content, question it, disagree with it, test it. The mind that truly understands is curious, not obedient. It doesn't accept truths without first breaking them apart and putting them back together. Remember, understanding isn't memorizing more clearly. It's uncovering the meaning hidden behind the word. That's why so many people believe they understand when they've merely rearranged what they memorized. True understanding is when you can explain something to someone else without looking at your notes, and it still sounds natural, fluid, and logical. Understanding is the first step toward freeing the mind. It's when knowledge stops being a weight and starts becoming power. Start translating what you study into your own words. Close the book and say out loud what you understood. Don't use the author's language, use yours. That forces the brain to form original connections. Ask intelligent questions. Ask, why does this happen? What if it were the opposite? How does this connect with what I already know? Questioning is the fuel of comprehension. Teach yourself. Explain the content as if you were teaching a child or a friend. If you get stuck, that's where your understanding still has a gap. Build simple mind maps, not to memorize, but to see relationships. The brain understands better when it sees the structure of ideas. Avoid rushing. Understanding requires pause, reflection, and even discomfort. When a subject feels too difficult, that's often the sign that you're close to real comprehension. When you begin to understand, something changes silently. Studying stops feeling like a burden and becomes a dialogue. And that inner dialogue prepares your mind for the next leap, the moment when knowledge becomes action. Now imagine the moment when knowledge stops being an idea on paper and becomes something you can do. This is the third level of the mind, the level of application. Here you discover whether you've truly learned or merely believed you had, because the real test of understanding isn't in repeating what you know, it's in using what you know. This is where theory collides with reality. The mind that applies is the mind that acts. It's not content with grasping ideas. It wants to see what happens when they're tested in the real world. At the second level, you understand, but at the third, you experiment. You step out of passivity and into the territory of error, practice, and iteration. And it's exactly there that learning becomes solid. Think about it. The human brain learns more by doing than by watching. Experience builds neural connections that no book can create. You can read 100 times about swimming, but you'll never truly know the water until you get in it. The same is true of any skill. You can study 1,000 theories, but you only master something when you apply it. And here lies the great secret of those who truly evolve. They don't wait to be ready to start. They learn while doing. They fail fast, correct fast, and learn even faster. Because every act of application is a mirror. It shows you what you truly master and what still needs work. Here's a practical way to strengthen level 3. Turn theory into action. After studying a concept, do something with it. If you learned a formula, apply it to a real problem. If you read about communication, test it in a conversation. If you studied focus, practice 1 uninterrupted hour of deep work. Solve simple problems daily. Apply 1 concept at a time, 1 problem, 1 idea. This practice creates clarity and eliminates the mental chaos of trying to use everything at once. Create mini projects. Learn something new, build something small to prove you understood it. It can be a short text, a piece of code, a simple experiment, or a quick video explanation. The point is to externalize what you learned. Analyze your mistakes immediately. Mistakes are the best teachers. When something doesn't work, don't run, investigate. Ask, why did this fail? What could I have done differently? Keep the action-reflection cycle. Apply, observe, adjust, repeat. That is the rhythm of real learning. Progress doesn't move in a straight line, but in a spiral. With every turn, you rise a little higher. As the mind starts to apply, it awakens a new kind of power, the power to solve. But there's something deeper, because application is only the beginning of intelligence. The next level is learning to see what others don't. Patterns, relationships, the invisible connections between ideas. Now imagine the moment when the world begins to connect. Nothing feels isolated anymore, and each idea starts revealing hidden links to others. This is the 4th level of the mind, analysis, where thinking stops being linear and becomes systemic. Here you no longer see pieces of information, you see relationships. While most people still try to memorize facts, the analytical mind sees how the pieces fit. It wants to understand causes and consequences, similarities and differences. It observes, compares, and quietly begins to decipher the logic of reality. This is the level where strategic thinking is born, the gaze that separates what is essential from what is noise. Because when you understand how something connects to something else, you begin to understand the whole system, and that changes everything. Information stops being a fragment and becomes structure. Analysis is the turning point between the average student and the true thinker. Those who analyze don't accept ideas as they arrive. They take concepts apart, examine each piece, and only then decide how to rebuild them. That attitude turns learning into something living, dynamic, and personal. But be warned, analysis is demanding. It requires deeper and therefore slower thinking, and that's exactly why few remain at this level. Many confuse mental effort with error, when in truth, that discomfort is the sign that the brain is expanding. The more you compare, the more you understand. The more you take things apart, the more clarity you create. And over time, you begin to see patterns that were once invisible. That is the moment when thinking stops merely following knowledge and begins producing it. Start by comparing opposite ideas. Take two concepts and ask, in what ways are they similar? In what ways do they contradict each other? This simple exercise forces the brain to move beyond repetition and enter deep analysis. Build contrast tables. List differences, causes, and consequences between themes. It's not just about remembering, it's about seeing patterns. Create relational mind maps. Don't just connect words, connect logical relationships, cause, effect, hierarchy, dependency. See knowledge as a living organism. Ask second-level questions. Don't just ask, what is this? But rather, how is this related to that? Or, what changes if one element is altered? Comparative thinking is the training ground of the analytical mind. Accept slowness. Deep thinking is slower, but infinitely more powerful. Effort is the price of clarity and the proof that your brain is evolving. When the mind learns to analyze, it starts to think like a strategist. But something essential is still missing, the ability to judge what truly matters. Because seeing patterns is one thing, deciding which ones are relevant is another. And that's where the next level of thought is born, judgment. Pay attention now, because this is the point where thought stops being merely intelligent and becomes wise. The fifth level is the level of evaluation, of prioritization, of lucid judgment. Here you don't just understand the world, you decide what truly matters within it. So far, you've learned to remember, understand, apply, and analyze. But none of these abilities have real power unless you can choose. Knowing what to ignore is as important as knowing what to understand. A mind that cannot prioritize drowns in information. A mind that judges with clarity builds wisdom. This is the level where knowledge becomes criteria. You begin to see that not all ideas deserve the same weight. Not every argument is solid. Not every theory is applicable. Not every answer is true. The evaluating mind questions everything, even itself. At this stage, thinking becomes conscious and responsible. You stop following models and start creating your own parameters. You stop looking for answers and begin crafting better questions. But there's a challenge. Judging is not the same as criticizing. Judgment requires balance, the courage to doubt without cynicism, and the humility to learn without submission. The mature mind doesn't seek to be right. It seeks to be clear, and clarity is the highest form of intellectual power. Evaluating is the art of giving weight to ideas. It's the moment when thought becomes a compass, and you, finally, stop being a student and become a decision maker. So to strengthen level 5, do this. Ask, why does this matter all the time? When studying or reflecting, don't accept anything without purpose. If an idea doesn't change how you see, act, or think, maybe it doesn't deserve your time. Create value hierarchies. List what is essential, what is useful, and what is dispensable. This trains your mind to filter and prioritize. Debate with respect, but without submission. Listen to opposing opinions, but evaluate arguments, not voices. Thinking for yourself is the first act of intellectual freedom. Write critical syntheses. After reading something, note what you agree with, what you disagree with, and what you still don't understand. This simple habit turns reading into active thought. And finally, suspend quick judgment. Rushing to conclude is the enemy of clarity. wait, observe, question. Discernment is born in the silence between stimulus and response. When you learn to judge with lucidity, you begin to see the world as a board of possibilities. But the evaluating mind doesn't create, it refines. And that's why the next level is the most creative of all, the level of synthesis, innovation, and creation, the mind that builds new ideas from what already exists. Now imagine the moment when thought stops following known paths and begins to carve new trails. This is the sixth level of the mind, creation, where knowledge turns into invention. Here the mind ceases to be just a tool for memory and becomes a source of originality. At the fifth level, you learn to judge what's worth your time. But at the sixth, you go further. You use everything you know to generate something that doesn't yet exist. It's the stage where thought becomes art. The creative mind combines old ideas into new forms, sees solutions where others see limits, and turns chaos into meaning. Creation isn't a gift. It's the natural result of a mind that has learned to think deeply. Those who understand, apply, analyze, and judge with clarity will, inevitably, create. Because creation is the reflection of a mind that has mastered the fundamentals and dares to go beyond them. But here's the secret. Creation doesn't come from overexertion. It comes from mental freedom. The best ideas appear when the brain is relaxed, curious, and playing with possibilities. Creativity is thought in its purest form of curiosity, the same state you had as a child. The creative mind doesn't fear mistakes. It understands that every mistake is just an attempt with another name. It doesn't seek perfection. It seeks discovery. That's why creation is one of the most human acts there is. It's the mind in dialogue with the unknown. So from today on, play with what you've learned. Take something you've mastered and change the rules. If you've learned a theory, test its opposite. If you've mastered a technique, invent a new way to apply it. To create is to play with knowledge. Ask questions that have no ready answers. The creative mind moves through curiosity, not certainty. Ask, what if? Why not? How could this work differently? Impossible questions open invisible doors. Mix different worlds. Great ideas are born when two fields collide. Take a concept from science and apply it to art. Take something from philosophy and link it to technology. Genius lives in the intersections. Write down everything that comes to mind. Ideas are fragile. Write down even the ones that seem absurd. Sometimes that's where innovation begins. Create to understand. Don't wait to master everything before you start producing. When you create, you understand your studies more deeply. The mind learns best in the act of expression. When the mind creates, it touches the edge of what it means to be human, the point where knowledge turns into meaning. But there's still one level higher, awareness of your own thinking. The moment when the mind not only thinks, but observes itself thinking. And that's where the seventh and final level begins. Now imagine your mind standing in front of a mirror. Not an ordinary mirror, but one that reflects thought itself. You're not just thinking, you're watching how you think. This is the seventh and final level of the mind, reflection. At this level, learning stops being something that happens to you and becomes something you control consciously. It's the stage of cognitive self-awareness, when you understand your own mental process. You're no longer the student trapped in the maze, you're the architect observing it from above. At the sixth level, you create, but at the seventh, you refine the creator within. You begin to recognize the patterns behind your successes, the triggers behind your mistakes, the useless repetitions, and the moments when your thinking becomes lazy. Here, the mind becomes the tool, and you become the operator. Reflection is the point where wisdom surpasses knowledge, because knowing something means being able to explain it. But understanding how you learn, think, and decide, that gives you the power to transform everything. The reflective mind observes its own behavior. It asks itself, why did I understand this easily, but not that? What did I do differently when I truly learn something? What distracts me? What deepens me? These questions don't just correct mistakes, they help you design a new way of thinking. Those who master this level master their own growth, because power no longer lies in the content, but in the process. You no longer depend on external techniques. You become your own method. And here's the most beautiful part. The more you reflect, the more you realize that thought has no end. The mind that observes itself grows in spirals. Each turn brings new understanding. Each mistake reveals another layer of itself. So explain what you've learned out loud, not for others, but for yourself. If you can't explain it clearly, it's because you don't yet understand it. External clarity is born from inner clarity. Analyze your own learning process. After you've learned something, write down, how did I learn this? What worked? What held me back? This simple habit turns studying into continuous self-development. Accept mistakes as diagnosis, not defeat. When you fail, don't blame yourself. Observe it like a scientist studying a phenomenon. Every mistake contains a map of what you haven't yet understood. Create rituals of metaconsciousness. Take 10 minutes a day to think about your own thinking. Ask yourself, what is my mind doing right now? Is it creating or repeating? That small pause reorganizes the brain to operate at higher levels of awareness. Keep a curious gaze. A wise mind isn't the one that knows the most. It's the one that never stops asking questions. Curiosity is the fuel of reflection, the mirror that keeps the ego from becoming blindness. When you reach the 7th level, you realize that a genius isn't born ready. He is built, layer by layer, consciousness by consciousness. And at the end of this journey, you understand that mastering the mind isn't about memorizing the world, but about understanding your own process of understanding. Those who reach this level know that thinking is an art, and learning is the most beautiful act of becoming human. Now, for all of this to truly sink into your subconscious, write in the comments, I choose to think at higher levels. Doing that will anchor the idea in your mind and inspire others to do the same. And if you want to keep evolving with me, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, because in the next videos, we'll go even deeper on this journey toward the total mastery of the mind. You're not here by accident. You're here because you truly want to think, and that is the first sign of a genius mind. Now think about the last thing you tried to learn. Maybe it was for work. Maybe it was a new skill. Maybe it was something you read in a book or watched in a video. Got it. Good. Now answer me this. Can you explain it to a 10-year-old?
Yes.
Okay, let that question hang. Open your eyes. If you hesitated, if you thought, well, maybe, sort of, I think so, then here's the hard truth. You don't actually understand it, and that's okay. Because today, I'm going to teach you the exact trick Richard Feynman used to become one of the greatest minds in physics. The same trick that helped him win a Nobel Prize. The same trick that made him legendary for being able to explain the most complex concepts in ways that anyone could understand. And here's the beautiful part. You can use this trick today, right now, on anything. Hey, pause, smile, I know what you're thinking. Another learning hack, another productivity tip, another thing that sounds great but doesn't actually work. But this is different, because this isn't about tricks or shortcuts. This is about understanding how your brain actually works and then working with it, not against it. So let me tell you a story. It's 1961. Feynman is at Caltech, already a famous physicist, and a student approaches him with a question. Professor Feynman, the student says, can you explain why spin 1/2 particles obey Fermi-Dirac statistics? Now, this is a standard quantum mechanics question. Any physics professor could rattle off the answer. There's an equation, there's a derivation, there's a textbook explanation. Feynman pauses, he thinks, and then he says something unexpected. I'll prepare a freshman lecture on it. The student is confused. A freshman lecture for an advanced quantum mechanics concept. But Feynman is serious. He goes away to prepare. Slow down here. A few days later, Feynman comes back, and he says, you know what? I couldn't do it. I couldn't reduce it to freshman level, which means we don't really understand it. All right, let that land. Let me repeat that. A Nobel Prize winning physicist, one of the smartest humans who ever lived, just admitted that he didn't really understand something. Not because he couldn't do the math, not because he didn't know the equations, but because he couldn't explain it simply. And in that moment, Feynman articulated something profound. If you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it. This became his standard, his test, his trick.
and it changed everything. A walk across stage. Let me ask you something. How do most people learn? They read something. They highlight it. Maybe they take notes. They tell themselves, okay, I've got it. And then they move on. Or maybe they're more diligent. They read it twice. They make flashcards. They review the material. They memorize key points. And you know what? They still don't understand it. Because here's what nobody tells you: reading is not learning. Memorizing is not understanding. Let me prove it to you. Point to audience eye. How many of you have read a book, gotten to the end and thought, that was great? And then a week later, someone asked you what it was about and you can barely remember. Pause for recognition. Yeah, all of us? Or how many of you have sat through a presentation, nodded along, understood everything in the moment, and then walked out completely unable to explain what you just learned? More recognition. This is the illusion of knowledge, and it's everywhere. Your brain is a lying liar that lies to you. It tells you that you understand things when you don't. It confuses familiarity with comprehension. It mistakes recognition for knowledge. Feynman understood this. He understood that most of what we think we know, we don't actually know. We just know the words. We know the surface. We know enough to fool ourselves, get intense. And this is why people stay stuck. They read all the books. They take all the courses. They consume all the content. And they never actually learn anything because they never test their understanding. They never expose the gaps. They never do the hard work of actually thinking. But Feynman had a solution. All right, let me break this down for you. The Feynman technique. 4 simple steps that will revolutionize the way you learn. Count on fingers. Step 1 is choose a concept you want to learn. Anything, literally anything. Quantum physics, marketing, cooking, relationships. Doesn't matter. Pick something you want to understand. Step 2, teach it to a child. Not actually to a child, though you could. But pretend you're teaching it to a 12-year-old, or your grandmother, or someone who knows absolutely nothing about the topic. And here's the key: use simple language, no jargon, no technical terms, no shortcuts. If you want to explain how an engine works, you can't just say combustion chamber and move on. You have to explain what combustion is, what a chamber is, why it matters. Step 3, identify gaps and go back to the source material. This is where it gets interesting, because when you try to explain something simply, you will get stuck, guaranteed. You'll hit a point where you realize, wait, I don't actually understand this part. That moment, that's gold. That's where learning happens. Because now you know exactly what you don't understand. You're not fooling yourself anymore. You've exposed the gap. So you go back. You study that specific part. You break it down. You figure it out. Step 4, simplify and use analogies. Once you understand it, make it even simpler. Use analogies. Use metaphors. Use stories. Because if you can connect new information to something people already understand, they'll get it instantly. Snap fingers like that. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that sounds nice, but why does this actually work? A fair question. Let me tell you what's happening in your brain. Or get excited about this. When you read something, your brain creates a very shallow neural pathway. It's like walking through tall grass once. You barely make a trail. But when you try to explain it, when you struggle to find the words, when you reorganize the information in your own way, your brain has to work. It has to fire multiple neural pathways. It has to connect different areas. It's like walking through that grass 50 times. You create a highway. This is called elaborative rehearsal in neuroscience. And it's the most effective way to create long-term memories and deep understanding. But there's more. When you identify gaps, when you get stuck trying to explain something, your brain enters a state of productive confusion. And research shows this is actually optimal for learning. Because your brain is like, oh crap, I thought I knew this, but I don't. I need to pay attention now. Learn with Feynman. And here's the really cool part. When you finally figure it out, when you fill that gap and suddenly understand, your brain releases dopamine. You get a hit of pleasure, a reward. Your brain literally rewards you for learning. And what do we do when we get rewarded? We want to do it again. This is why Feynman loved learning. It wasn't just intellectual curiosity. It felt good. Let me tell you how Feynman actually used this in his life. Share this story with energy. There's this famous story about Feynman at Los Alamos during World War II. They're building the atomic bomb. The stakes couldn't be higher. And there are all these young scientists, brilliant people, working on incredibly complex problems. But they're stuck. They're making mistakes. They're confused. So Feynman starts teaching them. Not lecturing, teaching. He breaks everything down to first principles. He uses simple language. He draws pictures. He makes analogies. And suddenly people start understanding. Not just memorizing formulas, but actually understanding what they're doing and why. One of his colleagues later said, Feynman didn't just know physics. He understood it so deeply that he could make anyone else understand it too. That's the power of this technique. Another example. After Feynman won the Nobel Prize, he got depressed. Yeah, seriously, because physics wasn't fun anymore. It had become work. It had become about reputation and publishing and being serious. So you know what he did? He started playing again. He'd watch a plate wobble in the cafeteria and think, I wonder why it wobbles that way. And then he'd work out the equations. Not because he had to, not because someone asked him to, but because he was curious. And he'd explain it to himself as if he were teaching it to a child. Okay, so when the plate spins, the centrifugal force does this, which causes this wobble, which creates this pattern. From that play, from that childlike curiosity and simple explanation, came some of his most important work on quantum electrodynamics. The work that won him the Nobel Prize started as play, and it started with simple explanations. As I get into teaching mode. Okay, enough theory. Let's get practical. How do you actually do this? Let's say you want to learn about compound interest. Basic financial concept, right? Everyone says compound interest is important. You've heard it a million times. But do you actually understand it? Let's test it using the Feynman technique. Step 1, you pick your concept. Compound interest. Step 2, you explain it to a child. Okay, so imagine you have $100, and you put it in a special piggy bank that gives you $10 extra every year. Cool, right? So after 1 year, you have $110. But here's where it gets interesting. In year 2, you don't just get $10 again. You get $10 on your original $100, plus you get $1 extra on the $10 you earned last year. So now you have $121. And every year, you earn money not just on what you started with, but on all the money you've earned along the way. So your money grows faster and faster. But see what I just did? I didn't use the word principle. I didn't use the word interest rate. I didn't use a formula. I used a piggy bank and simple numbers. Step 3. Identify gaps. Maybe you realize, wait, what if the interest rate changes? What if you take money out? What if you add money in? Great. Now you know exactly what you don't understand. Go research those specific questions. Step 4 is simplify further. Compound interest is like a snowball rolling down a hill. It starts small, but as it rolls, it picks up more snow. And the bigger it gets, the more snow it picks up each time around. Eventually, you have a massive snowball. Now anyone gets it. But here's where people screw this up. Let me tell you the 3 biggest mistakes. I count them out key. Mistake number 1, using jargon as a crutch. People try to explain something, but they can't resist using technical terms. Well, it's basically a paradigm shift in the operational framework. Stop. If you're using big words, you're hiding. Feynman was famous for this. He'd stop people mid-sentence and say, pretend I'm your grandmother. Explain it again. And suddenly, they'd realize they didn't actually understand what they were talking about. Mistake number 2, not actually writing it down or saying it out loud. People think they can do this in their head. They can't. When you force yourself to write or speak, you expose the gaps. You can't fake it. Your brain can't skip over the hard parts. Point ahead so your brain will lie to you. Yeah, I understand that part. Let's move on. But when you have to write it down or say it out loud, suddenly you're like, wait, I don't actually know what happens next. Mistake number 3, giving up too soon. This technique is uncomfortable. It's supposed to be. Because you're going to realize how much you don't understand. Most people hit that discomfort and quit. They think, this is too hard. I'm not smart enough. Wrong. You're just finally seeing the truth. And that's where the real learning begins. Get encouraging. Push through. Embrace the confusion. That's your brain building new pathways. Now let me tell you one of Feynman's secrets within the secret. Analogies. This is what separated Feynman from other physicists. He was a master of analogies. I share examples. Someone asks him to explain quantum electrodynamics. Impossible to explain, right? It's one of the most complex theories in physics. Feynman explains it like this. Imagine you're playing catch in the dark. You can't see the ball, but you know someone threw it because you caught it. That's kind of like how particles interact. We can't see the interaction itself, but we see the results. Is that technically perfect? No, but does it give you a foothold to start understanding? Absolutely. Or take his famous explanation of why ice is slippery. Most scientists would talk about pressure, induced phase transitions, and reduced friction coefficients. Feynman said, imagine you're walking on ball bearings. That's basically what's happening. There's a thin layer of liquid water acting like tiny rolling balls under your feet. Gesture. Instant understanding. Here's why analogies work so well. Your brain learns by connecting new information to things it already knows. If you give your brain a bridge, it's like this thing I already understand. It crosses that bridge instantly. Without analogies, you're asking your brain to build understanding from scratch. With analogies, you're giving it a shortcut to comprehension. And this is key for the Feynman technique. When you're explaining something, always ask yourself, what is this like? What does this remind me of? Here's something wild that Feynman discovered. The best way to learn something is to teach it. Sounds backwards, right? How can you teach something you don't know? But that's exactly the point. Get philosophical. When you position yourself as a teacher, even if you're just teaching yourself or an imaginary child, something shifts in your brain. You become responsible for the information. You can't just passively absorb it. You have to actively organize it, structure it, translate it. There's this concept in psychology called the protege effect. Studies show that students who prepare to teach material to others learn it more thoroughly than students who just study it for themselves. Why? Because when you're going to teach something, you think differently. You ask, what's the core idea here? What are the most important parts? What would confuse people? How do I make this clear? Point out P. Those are the questions that lead to deep understanding. Feynman knew this intuitively. That's why he loved teaching. Not because he wanted to show off how smart he was, though he could be a bit of a showman, but because teaching forced him to understand things at a deeper level. He once said, I couldn't do it. I couldn't reduce it to the freshman level. That means we really don't understand it. We don't understand it because we can't teach it. That's the standard. That's the bar. All right, let me give you the formula, the exact process you can use right now to learn anything. Present this as a clear system. First, consume the material. Read it, watch it, listen to it. Second, close the book or video. No peeking. Third, get a blank sheet of paper. Fourth, write at the top how I would explain this topic to a 12-year-old. Fifth, write or speak your explanation. No jargon. Simple words only. Sixth, circle every point where you got stuck. Seventh, go back to the source and study only those parts. Eighth, repeat steps 3 through 7 until you can explain it without getting stuck. Ninth, add analogies to make it even clearer. 10th, test yourself by explaining it to someone else or by recording yourself. Emphasize this as, that's it. 10 steps? You can do this in 20 minutes for a simple concept, an hour for something complex, a few sessions for something really difficult. But here's the magic. After you do this, you'll understand that concept better than 99% of people who studied it, because most people never expose their gaps. They never test their understanding. They convince themselves they know something when they don't. You'll actually know it. Let me show you how this works in different areas of life. Go through examples for students. Stop highlighting textbooks. Stop making flashcards that just have definitions. Instead, after each chapter, close the book. Write how I would explain this chapter to my younger sibling. When you get stuck, that's what you need to study. I promise you, 1 hour of Feynman technique study beats 10 hours of passive reading. For professionals, after meetings, after reading reports, after training sessions, take 5 minutes. Explain to yourself what you just learned as if you're explaining it to someone outside your industry. This does 2 things. First, you actually retain the information. Second, you'll be able to explain your work to anyone, which makes you incredibly valuable. For creatives, want to understand why certain stories work, why certain designs are effective, why certain music moves people. Use the Feynman technique. Break it down. Explain it simply. Find the principles underneath the surface. For parents, your kids ask you why the sky is blue. Instead of giving them a complicated answer or brushing them off, use this as a learning opportunity for yourself. Try to explain it simply. If you can't, look it up, learn it, then explain it to them. You'll both learn. And you'll teach them that it's okay not to know something. What matters is the curiosity to find out. Here's where this technique becomes truly powerful. It doesn't just help you learn specific things. It teaches you how to think. Get excited. This is what Feynman really understood. The technique isn't just about memorizing information. It's about developing metacognition. Thinking about thinking. Every time you use this technique, you're practicing self-awareness, recognizing what you don't know. You're practicing critical thinking, analyzing and breaking down concepts. You're practicing communication, translating complex ideas. You're practicing pattern recognition, finding analogies and connections. And you're practicing intellectual honesty, admitting gaps in understanding, all pausing. These are the skills that make you genuinely smart. Not knowing a lot of facts, anyone can Google facts. But being able to think clearly, learn quickly, and understand deeply, that's real intelligence. And here's the beautiful part. The more you use this technique, the better you get at it, the faster you identify gaps, the more easily you create analogies, the more naturally you think in first principles. Feynman used this technique for decades, and it became second nature to him. He couldn't help but break things down simply. He couldn't help but question until he understood. It became who he was, and it can become who you are too. So here's what I want you to do right now. Today, direct challenge. Pick one thing. Just one. Something you think you understand but you've never really tested. Maybe it's something from your job. Maybe it's a concept you learned in school. Maybe it's something you read in a book recently. Got it. Now, here's your challenge. Explain it to someone who knows nothing about it. Actually do it. Don't just think about doing it. Find someone, a friend, a family member, a colleague, and explain it to them. Or if you can't do that, write it out. Record yourself. But actually externalize your understanding. Hey, lean in he's. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to get stuck. You're going to realize you don't understand it as well as you thought. And that moment, that uncomfortable, slightly embarrassing moment, that's when the magic starts. Because now you know exactly what you need to learn. Now you can stop wasting time on things you already understand and focus on the gaps. This is efficient learning. This is smart learning. And this is how Feynman learned, and it's how you can learn too. But let me tell you something deeper, something Feynman understood that goes beyond just learning facts. Get philosophical and slow down, P. This technique isn't just about learning. It's about humility. Every time you use the Feynman technique, you're forced to confront your own ignorance. You're forced to admit what you don't know. And in a world where everyone is pretending to be an expert, where everyone is projecting confidence, even when they're confused, that's radical. Feynman once said, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." At pause, we are all fooling ourselves about something. We all have areas where we think we understand, but we don't. We all have beliefs we've never examined. We all have knowledge that's actually just memorized words without understanding. This technique is a tool for intellectual honesty, for seeing yourself clearly, for having the courage to say, "I don't actually understand this." And that courage, that's what separates average minds from great minds. Average minds protect their ego. They pretend to understand. They hide behind jargon and confidence. Great minds protect their understanding. They admit confusion. They expose gaps. They learn. A direct statement, which one do you want to be? Let me leave you with one final story about Feynman. Wire tell this with emotion late in his life. Feynman was battling cancer. He was dying, and he knew it. And someone asked him what he was most proud of in his career. You'd think he'd say the Nobel Prize, or his work on the atomic bomb, or his contributions to quantum physics that changed our understanding of the universe. But you know what he said. He said he was most proud of the Feynman lectures on physics, a series of undergraduate lectures he gave at Caltech, lectures where he took the most complex topics in physics and explained them so clearly, so simply that anyone could understand.
Positive.
Why? Because those lectures represented what he believed was most important, not just understanding, but sharing that understanding. making knowledge accessible, breaking down barriers between experts and everyone else. He spent years developing those lectures, refining them, simplifying them, making them better, because he believed that if you truly understand something, you can explain it to anyone. And if you can explain it to anyone, you can change the world. ARB, look directly at audience X. That's what this technique is really about. It's not just about making you smarter. It's about making knowledge accessible. It's about breaking down the barriers between experts and normal people. It's about democratizing understanding. There's another layer to this that I need to share with you. Because when you start using this technique regularly, something interesting happens. You start to see the world differently. Walk to the other side of the stage. You stop accepting things at face value. You start questioning more. Not in an annoying, contrarian way, but in a genuine, curious way. Feynman had this quality he couldn't help but ask why. About everything. Why does water swirl down the drain in that direction? Why do mirrors reverse left and right but not up and down? Why do we shake hands as a greeting? Some people thought it was exhausting. His friends would sometimes groan when he started asking questions at dinner parties. But that curiosity, that relentless need to understand, that's what made him brilliant. And here's the thing, you can develop that same quality. The Feynman technique trains you to be curious. Because every time you try to explain something and get stuck, you're training your brain to notice gaps, to ask questions, to dig deeper. Get passionate. This changes everything. It changes how you read. It changes how you listen. It changes how you think. You stop being a passive consumer of information and become an active learner. You stop memorizing and start understanding. You stop fooling yourself and start knowing yourself. Let me give you a real example from my own life. I thought I understood how democracy worked. I voted, I read the news, I had opinions about politics. I could talk about checks and balances and separation of powers. But then I tried to explain it using the Feynman technique. I sat down and wrote how I would explain democracy to a 12-year-old, and I got stuck immediately. Why do we have an electoral college? I couldn't explain it without using circular logic. Why is the Senate structured the way it is? I realized I'd never actually thought about it. What's the actual difference between federal and state power? I knew there was a difference, but I couldn't articulate it clearly. It was humbling. Here I was a grown adult with political opinions, and I couldn't explain the basics of my own government system. So I went back. I studied. Not everything, just the specific parts where I got stuck. And then I tried again. And you know what? Now I actually understand democracy. Not perfectly, but genuinely. I can explain it to anyone. And more importantly, my political opinions are now based on actual understanding, not just inherited beliefs or media talking points. That's the power of this technique. It forces you to be honest about what you know versus what you think you know. Shift ton, a now. I want to address something that might be bothering some of you. You might be thinking, this sounds great, but I don't have time. I'm busy. I've got work, family responsibilities. I get it, we're all busy. But here's the thing, this technique doesn't take more time. It takes less time. Think about it. How much time do you waste right now reading things you forget? Sitting in meetings you don't understand? Taking courses that don't stick? Watching videos that don't teach you anything? What if instead of consuming 10 hours of content and retaining 10%, you spent 3 hours using the Feynman technique and retained 90%? Do the math gesture. That's more effective learning in less time. Feynman wasn't successful because he spent more hours studying than everyone else. He was successful because he studied more effectively. He didn't waste time fooling himself. He didn't waste time on shallow learning. He went deep, he went fast, and he moved on. And here's another secret. Once you get good at this technique, it becomes fast, really fast. When Feynman encountered a new concept, he could break it down in his head almost instantly. He'd automatically ask, how would I explain this to a kid? And if he couldn't, he'd know exactly what he needed to learn. That skill, the ability to quickly identify what you don't understand, that's a superpower. It means you never waste time studying things you already know. You never fool yourself into thinking you understand when you don't. You go straight to the gaps and fill them. I fair point to audience, imagine having that ability. Imagine being able to look at any topic and immediately know, I understand these 3 parts, but I don't understand these 2 parts. Let me focus on those. That's efficient learning. That's what this technique gives you. Let me tell you about another time Feynman used this approach, and it's one of my favorite stories. I sure share this story with energy. Sir Feynman was once asked to serve on a committee evaluating science textbooks for California schools. He agreed, thinking it would be straightforward. Look at the books, see if they're accurate, give feedback. But when he started reading the books, he was horrified. The books were full of words, big words, scientific-sounding words. But when he tried to understand what they were actually teaching, he realized they weren't teaching anything. There was one book that had a whole chapter about energy. It defined energy. It categorized different types of energy. It used the word energy on every page. But it never explained what energy actually is. It never gave students a way to understand it, to visualize it, to connect it to their experience. Feynman tried to explain energy the way the textbook did. He couldn't. It was just circular definitions and empty terminology. So he tried explaining it his way. Energy is like money. You can't see money directly. You see dollars, coins, checks, bank accounts. Energy is the same. You can't see energy directly. You see motion, heat, light, sound. But just like you can convert dollars to coins to checks, you can convert motion to heat to light. It's all the same thing in different forms. Pause. Boom. Now a kid understands energy. But the textbook couldn't do that, because whoever wrote it didn't actually understand energy deeply enough to explain it simply. And this, Feynman realized, was everywhere, in schools, in businesses, in government, people using complex language to hide simple ideas. Or worse, using complex language to hide the fact that they have no ideas at all. Get serious, this is why the Feynman technique matters. Not just for you, but for society. Because we live in a world where complexity is mistaken for intelligence, where jargon is mistaken for expertise, where confidence is mistaken for competence. And that's dangerous. When politicians use complex language to avoid explaining their policies, that's dangerous. When companies use buzzwords to avoid explaining their products, that's dangerous. When experts use jargon to avoid admitting they don't know something, that's dangerous. The Feynman technique is a weapon against that. It's a tool for cutting through bullshit. It's a standard for honesty. If someone can't explain their idea simply, they don't understand it. Period. Point directly at audience, and you have the power to hold people to that standard. When someone gives you a complicated explanation, you can say, "Can you explain that more simply?" When someone uses jargon, you can say, "Pretend I'm 12." What does that mean? You'll be amazed how often people can't do it. And you'll be amazed how clarifying it is when they can. Now, I want to talk about something Feynman discovered that goes even deeper. He realized that understanding isn't just about breaking things down. It's also about building them up. Shift to a more thoughtful tone. See, there are 2 ways to learn something. You can take something complex and break it into simple parts. That's analysis. That's what we've been talking about. But you can also take simple parts and build them into something complex. That's synthesis. And that's where creativity lives. Feynman was brilliant at both. He could take quantum mechanics and break it down into simple ideas anyone could understand. But he could also take simple ideas and combine them in new ways to create breakthroughs nobody had thought of before. And the Feynman technique trains both skills. When you're trying to explain something simply, you're doing analysis. You're breaking it down, finding the core components, understanding the relationships. But when you're creating analogies, when you're connecting new information to things you already know, when you're reorganizing ideas in your own way, that's synthesis. That's creativity. Get excited. This is why people who master this technique don't just become better learners. They become better thinkers, better problem solvers, better creators. Because they can move fluidly between breaking things down and building things up. Between understanding and innovation, Feynman did this constantly. He'd learn about biology by breaking it down to first principles, and then he'd see connections to physics that biologists had missed. He'd learn about computing and see possibilities that computer scientists hadn't considered. He'd learn about art and find insights that applied to science. That's the ultimate goal here. Not just to understand individual topics, but to see connections between topics. To build a web of understanding that lets you think across disciplines, combine ideas in novel ways, solve problems nobody else can solve. Eyes poiser, and it all starts with being able to explain things simply. Let me give you one more practical example before we wrap up. And this one is personal. Get vulnerable. I used to think I was pretty good at communication. I could write, I could speak, I could present. People would tell me I explained things well. But then I started really using the Feynman technique, not just occasionally, but systematically, on everything. And I realized I wasn't as good as I thought. I was good at sounding smart. I was good at using the right words. I was good at performing knowledge. But when I tried to explain complex topics to actual 12-year-olds, I struggled. When I tried to explain my work to my family, they didn't get it. When I tried to teach something without using any technical terms, it was hard. I had been fooling myself. So I practiced. I used the technique over and over, on my work, on things I read, on ideas I had, everything. And slowly, I got better, not just at explaining things, but at understanding them. My thinking became clearer, my work became better, my conversations became deeper. Look at audience ease. And here's what I want you to understand. If you're not regularly testing your understanding by trying to explain things simply, you're probably fooling yourself too. We all are. It's human nature. But you can change that today, right now. All you have to do is commit to using this technique. Not once, not occasionally, but as a regular practice. Every time you learn something new, explain it simply. Every time you think you understand something, test that understanding by teaching it. Every time you hear complex language, challenge it by asking for simple explanation. Make it a habit. Make it a standard. Make it who you are. So here's what I want you to remember. Or slow down. Make this powerful. You are capable of understanding anything, literally anything. If you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to break it down, if you're willing to expose your gaps and fill them. The Feynman technique isn't magic. It's just a systematic way of doing what great learners have always done. Question, simplify, and test understanding. But it works. God, does it work? I've seen it transform students who were failing into students who excel. I've seen it help professionals master new skills in a fraction of the usual time. I've seen it give people confidence they never had before, because they genuinely understand things now instead of just memorizing them. And I know it can work for you too. I found a final challenge. So here's my challenge to you. One more time, use this technique once. Just once. On one topic. See what happens. Pick something you think you understand. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be important. Just something. And then sit down with a blank piece of paper. Write at the top how I would explain this to a 12-year-old and write or speak or record yourself. Whatever works for you. And when you get stuck, and you will get stuck, don't give up. That's where the learning is. Go back to the source. Figure out that specific part. And try again. Do this for 20 minutes. That's all. 20 minutes. I promise you, those 20 minutes will teach you more about learning than a semester of traditional study. And maybe, just maybe, it will change the way you approach learning forever. Of our smile, because that's what happened to Feynman. He discovered this approach early in his life. And it became his superpower. It's why he could master any topic he set his mind to. It's why he could explain the most complex concepts to anyone. It's why he won a Nobel Prize. Not because he was born smarter than everyone else, but because he learned how to learn. And now you know his secret. I walk to center stage a thank you. and hey, if this resonated with you, if you're excited to start learning like Feynman learned, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel, because we're just getting started. There's so much more to explore about how Feynman thought, how he learned, how he approached problems that everyone else thought were impossible. We're going to dive into his other techniques, his approach to problem solving, his strategies for staying curious, his methods for thinking clearly. Join us. Let's learn together. Let's think together. Let's become the kind of people who don't just consume information, but truly understand it. The sun is always shining, the light is always there, scattered, diffuse, harmless. But focus that light, concentrate it into a single point, and suddenly it becomes dangerous. It burns, it creates fire. Same light, same energy, different result. Put down the props, look directly at audience. Your mind works the same way. Right now, your attention is scattered, jumping from thought to thought, distracted by notifications, split across multiple concerns, diffuse, harmless, ordinary, but focus that same mind, concentrated into a single point, and suddenly it becomes dangerous. It solves problems others can't solve. It sees patterns others miss. It creates insights that seem like genius, secapaz, and same mind, same intelligence, different result. Direct address. The difference between an ordinary mind and a dangerous mind isn't IQ, isn't education, isn't even talent. It's focus. The ability to concentrate mental energy into a single point with such intensity that barriers dissolve, problems crack open, and insights emerge. Richard Feynman had this ability, not because he was born with a special brain, but because he developed a specific skill. A skill so powerful that it turned his ordinary mind into one of the most dangerous minds of the 20th century. Ein Lehnenix today, I'm going to teach you that skill. The focus skill that turns ordinary minds dangerous. And I'm going to show you exactly how to develop it, starting immediately, because you have the same mental horsepower as Feynman, the same cognitive capacity, the same potential. What you're missing is the ability to focus that power into a concentrated beam instead of letting it scatter into uselessness. Kepoi Savar walk across stage. Let me start with a story that reveals this skill in action. It's 1965. Feynman is working on quantum electrodynamics. Incredibly complex problem. The mathematics is so difficult that most physicists can't even follow his papers, let alone contribute. And someone asks him, how do you solve these impossible problems? What makes you able to see things other physicists can't? Hack shares his answer, and Feynman says something that seems too simple to be the answer. I just think about it constantly, completely, with my full attention, for months sometimes, years, until the problem reveals itself. Make the point, that's it. That's the skill. Complete, sustained, intense focus on a single problem, not genius. Not special mathematics ability. Focus. But here's what most people don't understand. That kind of focus isn't normal. That kind of focus is a developed skill. Most people can't maintain complete attention on anything for more than a few minutes before their mind wanders. After to get intense, Feynman could focus on a single problem for hours, days, months, with his full mental capacity concentrated on that one thing. No distractions, no mind wandering, no scattered attention. That's what made him dangerous. That's what let him solve impossible problems. Not smarter, more focused. At present, the core insight key. Here's what you need to understand. Your mind has enormous power, but that power is almost always scattered, diffuse, spread thin across 1,000 different things, notifications, worries, plans, memories, distractions, thoughts bouncing from one thing to another. Your attention never stays in one place long enough to generate real power. To make the analogies, it's like that sunlight. Scattered, it's just ambient light, harmless, ordinary. But focused through a magnifying glass, it creates fire, burns through paper. Same energy, different configuration. Your scattered attention is ordinary, but focused attention becomes dangerous, solves problems, creates insights, achieves results that seem impossible. A direct statement, and the difference between ordinary and dangerous isn't how much mental energy you have. It's whether you can focus that energy. Fact present the skill breakdown. So let me break down the focus skill. The specific components that Feynman mastered. The things you need to develop to turn your ordinary mind dangerous. Component 1, sustained attention. Most people can focus for short bursts, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe 20 if it's really interesting. Then their attention drifts. They need a break. They check their phone. They think about something else. Make the contrast. Feynman could sustain focus for hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours sometimes. His attention would stay locked on a single problem with unwavering intensity. Not effortlessly, it took skill, but he developed that skill through practice. Explain what this enables. Why does sustained attention matter? Because deep problems require deep thinking. You can't solve complex problems in 5-minute bursts. You need to hold the entire problem in your mind. All the pieces, all the relationships, all the constraints, simultaneously. That requires sustained attention. The ability to keep your mind focused on one thing long enough for patterns to emerge, for connections to form, for insights to develop. Pass and give example. Feynman working on a physics problem. He'd sit at his desk. He'd think for hours, not writing much, not doing calculations, just thinking, holding the problem in his mind, turning it over, examining it from different angles, maintaining complete focus. And after hours, sometimes many hours, something would click. A pattern would emerge. An insight would form. The problem would crack open. Isarts make the point that insight didn't come in the first 5 minutes. It came after hours of sustained focus. Most people never get there because they can't sustain attention that long. Their mind wanders after 10 minutes. They check their phone after 20. They give up after 30. They never reach the depth where real insights live. Component 2, exclusive attention. This is different from sustained attention. This is about eliminating distractions, about making your focus exclusive to one thing. Nothing else gets attention. Fear explain. Most people practice divided attention. They're working on something, but they're also monitoring email, checking texts, listening to music, thinking about other things. Their attention is split. Even if they sustain attention on one thing for a while, they're not giving it exclusive attention. Part of their mind is elsewhere. Make the contrast. Feynman practiced exclusive attention when he was thinking about a problem. That problem got 100% of his cognitive capacity, nothing else. No distractions, no divided attention, complete exclusivity. A severed share example. People would talk to him while he was thinking. He wouldn't hear them, not because he was rude, because his attention was completely absorbed in the problem. There was no mental capacity left over to process external stimuli. His wife would call him for dinner. He wouldn't respond. Students would knock on his office door. He wouldn't notice. His attention was exclusively focused. Explain why this matters. Why does exclusive attention matter? Because divided attention fragments your mental power. Each distraction takes a piece. Each split in focus reduces your effective cognitive capacity. But exclusive attention concentrates everything. All your mental power directed at one target. That's when your mind becomes dangerous. Make it practical. Think about a magnifying glass. If you move it around, the light scatters. No fire, but hold it steady, focused exclusively on one spot, and that spot ignites. Your attention works the same way. Keep it moving, keep it divided, and nothing ignites. Hold it steady on one thing, and that thing catches fire. Problems burn away. Insights emerge. Thus, component 3, deep attention. This is about the level of engagement. Surface level attention versus deep attention. Shallow processing versus deep processing. Explain the differences? Shallow attention is reading words without thinking about meaning, following procedures without understanding principles, consuming information without processing it. Deep attention is engaging fully, questioning everything, connecting to other knowledge, building understanding, really thinking, not just exposing yourself to information. Make the contrast. Most people practice shallow attention most of the time. They're consuming content, skimming articles, half listening to lectures. Superficial engagement. Feynman practiced deep attention. He engaged fully with everything, questioned every statement, challenged every assumption, connected every new idea to existing knowledge, built genuine understanding. If I give examples in Feynman reading a physics paper, he doesn't just read the words, he reconstructs the reasoning. He questions the logic. He tries to derive the equations himself. He looks for flaws. He builds his own understanding from first principles. That's deep attention. Complete engagement, not passive consumption, active construction. Explain why this matters. Deep attention generates insights. Shallow attention just passes information through your mind. In one side, out the other, nothing sticks, nothing transforms. But deep attention transforms information into understanding, creates connections, generates new ideas. That's where real thinking happens. That's where dangerous minds operate. Component 4, recovery and renewal. This might surprise you, but intense focus requires recovery. You can't maintain dangerous level focus indefinitely. You need breaks. You need renewal. Explain. Feynman understood this. He'd work with intense focus for hours, then he'd completely disengage. Play bongos, draw, go to a strip club. Do something completely different that let his mind rest. Not passive rest. Active disengagement, something engaging but different. That allowed his focused mind to recover. Make the point most people try to stay partially focused all the time. Never intense focus, never complete rest. Just constant moderate attention to everything. Always working, never recovering. That doesn't develop dangerous focus. That creates chronic scattered attention. mediocre performance, ordinary results. I'd explain the pattern here. The pattern for dangerous focus is intense concentration, then complete disengagement. Not moderate attention with moderate breaks. Intense attention with deep recovery. Bring components together. So those are the 4 components. Sustained attention, maintaining focus for extended periods. Exclusive attention, eliminating all distractions. Deep attention, engaging fully, not superficially. Recovery, allowing periods of complete disengagement. Make the promise of master these 4 components, and your ordinary mind becomes dangerous. Capable of solving problems you can't solve now. Seeing patterns you miss now. Generating insights that seem impossible now. As present the development process. So how do you develop these components? How do you train your mind to focus with Feynman level intensity? Let me give you the specific practices. The training regimen that builds dangerous focus. Practice 1, start with the 20-minute barrier. Most people can't maintain focus for 20 minutes straight. Their mind wanders. They need to check something. They get distracted. So start there. Pick one task, one problem, one thing to think about. Set a timer for 20 minutes. Focus exclusively on that one thing until the timer goes off. Make it concrete, and no phone, no email, no music, no interruptions, just you and the problem. For 20 minutes straight, your mind will try to wander. Notice when it does. Bring it back. Every time it drifts, bring it back. Train the muscle of sustained attention. Set the progression. Do this daily. Every day, 20 minutes of exclusive focus. After a week, you'll notice it gets easier. Your mind wanders less. Your focus strengthens. Then increase. 25 minutes, 30 minutes. Gradually build your capacity for sustained attention. Share the goal. The goal isn't to focus all day. The goal is to develop the ability to focus intensely when you need to. 2 hours of dangerous focus beats 8 hours of scattered attention. Practice 2. Practice 2. Eliminate decision fatigue about distractions. Every time you resist a distraction, you use willpower. Every time you choose not to check your phone, you make a decision that depletes your mental energy. Present the solution. So don't rely on willpower. Remove the decisions. Make distraction impossible during focus time. Phone in another room. Email closed. Internet off if possible. Notifications disabled. Nothing that requires you to decide. Should I check this? Guthrie explained why, when distraction isn't an option, your mind settles into focus more easily. You're not constantly fighting temptation. You're not making decisions. You're just focusing. Give Feynman an example. Feynman would go to his office, close the door, turn off the phone, make himself unavailable. Not because he had superhuman willpower, because he removed the decisions. Practice 3. Use a focusing ritual. This is powerful. A specific sequence of actions that signals to your brain. No, we focus. Make it concrete, and maybe it's making a cup of tea, sitting in a specific chair, opening a specific notebook. The ritual itself doesn't matter. What matters is consistency. Same ritual, same sequence, every time before focused work. Varsar explained the mechanisms. Over time, your brain learns. The ritual becomes a trigger. It signals, this is focus time. Your mind shifts gears, drops distractions, prepares for deep work. Share Feynman's ritual. Feynman had rituals. Specific ways he'd set up his workspace. Specific times he'd work. Specific conditions he'd create, not superstition. Conditioning, training his brain to enter focus mode. Practice 4. Practice mono, tasking obsessively. Throughout your day, whatever you're doing, do only that thing. If you're eating, just eat. If you're walking, just walk. If you're talking to someone, just talk to them. Make the point. This trains your brain to focus on one thing. Most people are constantly multitasking. Eating while scrolling, walking while texting, talking while thinking about other things. That fragments attention. Trains your brain to be scattered. Makes sustained focus harder. Show the alternative vibe, but if you practice monotasking obsessively, you train focus. Your brain learns to give full attention to whatever you're doing. That capacity transfers to your focused work. Practice 5. Build your capacity for boredom. This is crucial. Most people can't focus because they can't tolerate boredom. The moment something isn't stimulating, they seek distraction. Explain the problem, but deep focus often feels boring initially. Before insights emerge, before patterns become clear, there's a period where you're just sitting with a problem. Nothing happening. Feels like nothing's working. That's when most people quit. That's when they check their phone. That's when they give up. Show the solution. But that's the critical period. That's when your unconscious mind is processing. That's when deep thinking is happening. You have to sit through the boredom to reach the insight. Let Forrest make it practically. So practice tolerating boredom. Sit without stimulation. Let your mind be unstimulated. Don't reach for your phone. Don't seek entertainment. Just sit with nothing. Build your capacity to tolerate non-stimulation. That translates directly to your ability to maintain focus through the boring parts of deep thinking. Vaser, tell transformation story. Let me tell you about someone who developed this skill. Call her Sarah. Sarah was smart, capable, but couldn't focus. Her mind constantly wandered. She'd start working on something, and within 5 minutes, she'd be checking email, scrolling social media, thinking about other things. She was frustrated. She knew she was capable of more, but couldn't concentrate long enough to achieve it. Ain Har share her process. Then she learned about Feynman's focus skill, and she started training. 20 minutes a day of sustained, exclusive focus. No exceptions. Every day. First week was brutal. Her mind rebelled, wanted distractions, felt anxious without stimulation. But she persisted. At show the progression. Ism second week was slightly easier. Third week, she increased to 30 minutes. Fourth week, she noticed something. She could focus at will now. When she decided to focus, her mind obeyed. 6 months later, she could maintain intense focus for 2 to 3 hours straight. Not all day, but when she needed to, she could concentrate with dangerous intensity. I share the results. And her work transformed. She solved problems in hours that used to take weeks. She had insights that seemed to come from nowhere. Her productivity multiplied, not because she became smarter, because she learned to focus all her intelligence into a concentrated beam instead of scattering it. A-Segret make the universal points. That's available to you. That transformation, that capability, that dangerous focus. You don't need a better brain. You need to learn to focus the brain you have. Address the modern challenge. Now, here's the challenge. The modern world is designed to destroy your focus. Notifications, social media, email messages, news, entertainment, constant stimulation, constant distraction. Your environment is actively fighting your attempts to focus. Assemblers make the stakes clear, and most people surrender. They let their attention be pulled in 1,000 directions. They become scattered, distracted, incapable of dangerous focus. And they wonder why they can't accomplish what they're capable of. Why they can't solve hard problems. Why they can't achieve breakthrough results. Reveal the truth. It's not because they're not smart enough. It's because they can't focus their intelligence long enough or intensely enough to generate real power. At present, the choice was, so you have a choice. You can let the modern world scatter your attention. Make your mind ordinary, harmless, constantly distracted, or you can fight back. Develop dangerous focus. Learn to concentrate your mental energy with intensity that burns through problems. Share Feynman's advantage. This was Feynman's advantage. Not that he was smarter than other physicists. Many physicists had similar intelligence. But Feynman could focus with greater intensity, for longer periods, with deeper engagement. That made the difference. That's what let him solve problems others couldn't. Not more intelligence. Better focus. Make it personally, and you have access to the same advantage. You can develop the same skill. You can train your mind to focus with the same dangerous intensity. Present the commitment, but it requires commitment. It requires practice. It requires saying no to distractions. It requires training your attention like an athlete trains their body. Sex give the challenge. So here's my challenge. Starting today, practice dangerous focus 20 minutes. One task, exclusive attention, no distractions, every single day for 30 days. Can her make the prediction? Do that, and you'll feel the difference. Your mind will become sharper, more capable, more powerful. Problems you struggle with now will crack open. Insights will emerge. Results will improve. Not because you got smarter, because you learned to focus your intelligence. Share deeper principle. Here's the deeper principle. Most people never use their full mental capacity. Not because they don't have it, but because they never focus it. It's like having a powerful flashlight but never turning it on. The power is there, but it's not being used. Let me just make the analogy. Dangerous focus is turning on the flashlight, pointing it at one spot, maintaining that beam, and watching what illuminates. Suddenly you see things you missed before. Patterns become clear. problems become solvable. Not because you got a better flashlight, because you turned on the one you have. Give final Feynman example. Late in Feynman's life, someone asks him, "What's your secret? How do you solve impossible problems?" And he gives an answer that sounds too simple. I think about them until they become possible, with complete focus, for as long as it takes. Pause it. That's the secret. That's the skill. Complete focus, maintained until results emerge. Not genius. Focus. Walk to center. You have an ordinary mind, same as everyone else, same cognitive capacity, same potential. The difference between ordinary and dangerous isn't inherent, it's developed. It's the focus skill. ACOG direct address so develop it. Train it. Build your capacity for sustained, exclusive, deep attention. Learn to concentrate your mental energy into a focused beam. Has make the promise do that, and your ordinary mind becomes dangerous, capable of solving problems that seem impossible now, seeing insights that are invisible now, achieving results that feel out of reach now. Far final statement, the sun is always shining. The energy is always there. The question is, will you scatter it into harmlessness or focus it into fire? Your mind has the power. The question is, will you develop the skill to focus that power? Make your mind dangerous. Develop the focus skill. Thank you. Be at Ting, and if you want to understand more about how Feynman trained his mind, how he developed not just focus, but all the cognitive skills that made him exceptional, do me a favor. Like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're exploring the actual mental training that creates exceptional capability. Not motivation, not inspiration, actual skill development. Join us. Let's build dangerous minds together. See you in the next